Welcome to Verify This, a podcast brought to you by Condatis. We deliver bespoke identity and access management solutions leveraging the Microsoft Entra product family. Our solutions are designed to simplify onboarding, enhance security, and boost business efficiency for clients globally. Throughout the series, we'll connect with leading experts across the industry to bring you insight on all things digital identity. Hear about trending issues, lessons learned, and priorities for the future within identity verification and authentication.
When we talk about sharing a credential, you are not exposing the credential. So the credential remains firmly within your wallet. What you are sharing is certain pieces of information from that credential. And you have all of the convenience of being able to share things quickly, but you do not sacrifice security.
Welcome to episode 3 of Verify This. I'm your host, Lucy McNeil, and today we're joined by Will Fletcher, Lead Business Analyst at Condatis. In our last episode, we unpacked the future of digital identity with Alistair Murray, and the area of discussion led us to explore decentralized identity, specifically around how it can integrate with existing identity stacks and how organizations can get started leveraging this new technology. Something that we'd like to explore more, however, is why organizations would want to perhaps shift to a decentralized way of operating. So today we'll be talking about the scenarios where verifiable credentials, a pillar within decentralized identity, might be overlooked, but actually incredibly beneficial to organizations. A bit of background on our guest today. Will has an extensive 8-year career within the IT sector, spanning industries such as government, energy, and finance. A key product owner within Condatis, Will leads the team to shape innovative solutions and is currently driving a pioneering greenfield project in the realm of decentralized identity technology, leading process analysis and change management. Welcome, Will.
Hello. That was very, very well put. I feel like a proper professional.
Well, it's true. It is verified. Firstly, let's speak to verifiable credentials in a general sense. It's going to be the kind of topic of discussion for us today. It's likely that most people listening in will have a fairly good idea of what a verifiable credential is, but let's work on the assumption that this is not the case. When I was chatting to Alistair in our last episode, he made a very good point about decentralized identity and the idea of making the person the network. And it's really verifiable credentials, if we're right, that enables this to be a concept. So it'd be great to hear your understanding of verifiable credentials and why we're finding more of a need to implement them.
Yeah, no, definitely. So verified credentials are electronic documents stored on your phone that are verified by, or issued, by different organizations that live on the trust framework, and they are then verified by other ones as well. So essentially you have a credential on your phone that is to a very high level of trust, verified by the agreed upon network. So a good way to think about it is you've got all of the authenticity of a paper document, but it's electronic.
And why do you think, to that point, why do you think that's more beneficial than a paper document? You know, what's been the shift recently that would make that more desirable for an organization?
Yeah, so this is the convenience of having it electronic, right? So in my mind, the verified credentials, why they're so great is because you essentially have the security that comes with a very high trust document or credential, but then you have the convenience of being able to share it electronically. So it's lives with the user or the whoever has the wallet. So you have a wallet on your device that stores the credential, and you can share it with any entity that you need to. We could go into lots of things around, like, what are the organizations that make up a trust framework? You could have a trust hierarchy. So you could have something very high trust, like a bank, where they could issue a credential and that would have a lot of weight behind it. And then you could go all the way down to like a street vendor, and they might not be issuing credentials, but they might be verifying them. So it could be something like if someone was selling alcohol from a bar, and you had an identity credential, and in the country of residence, it was agreed upon that the trust framework was like tickety boo, and you could use your identity credential for ID. You could share your identity credential with the street vendor who's selling alcohol, and then prove that you're of age. We could also then touch on things like zero knowledge proofs, which I don't know if we're going to go into later, but because we all agreed that your credential says you're over 18, they don't actually know. They don't need to know how much older you are than 18, just that you qualify above that age. So yeah, I know I've thrown a lot of concepts out there very quick, but yeah, it's whenever you get into to VCs or verified credentials, there is a lot they can do within like a very simple operating framework, but the benefit kind of extrapolates out the way very quickly.
I guess one of the examples you just gave there in terms of disclosing your age comes down to perhaps one of well, definitely a positive to the person, the becoming the network, and that idea of privacy, and being selective as to how much somebody wants to disclose with another person. So it comes down to privacy, security, the fact, right, it's tamper proof is this desirable factor about it as well.
It's probably worth kind of mentioning that the mechanism behind that. So when we talk about sharing a credential, you are not exposing the credential. So the credential remains firmly within your wallet. What you are sharing is certain pieces of information from that credential, and you decide what piece of information you want to share, and that decision is usually based upon a request. So in the case of me I say we're at the Fringe Festival in Edinburgh, and we're in a perfect world where the UK government has decided to give everyone a government ID credential, and they store it on their phone. When I go to a street vendor and say, "Hey, I'd like to buy a bottle of beer," I'd only be sharing a copy of the information within my credential. And it could be the information I'm sharing, like we said earlier, is just the fact that I am over 18, and they've requested that specific part from my government ID. So they wouldn't need, say it was a passport credential, they wouldn't need like my passport number. They would only need the specific piece of information that they're looking for to validate the transaction.
And that kind of validation piece leads nicely into the different kind of roles within this new type of tech. So I guess with any traditional identity solution, there are pillars which remain true. And the same can be said with verifiable credentials in terms of the different roles within that, because the concept isn't vastly different or revolutionary to how we operate now. It's perhaps maybe more just down to the way things are hosted.
Yes, exactly. So you have obviously issuers. So those are organizations or entities that can issue credentials. You could also be a verifier of said credentials. You could be both of those things. So you could be an issuer and a verifier. Like I said, it depends on like where you sit on, we'll call it the trust pyramid, but like, what is it that you're needing to do to interact with the decentralized network? And then you also have holders, which are obviously the users who have the credentials. Or a holder could be an item, so it could be a non-person entity as well. So yeah, I won't go off into any different tangents because, like I said, when you start talking about decentralized, the concept of having a electronic credential that is tied to a person or an entity or a item, and it's validated by a high trust framework, it becomes quite powerful, right? Because you can then start doing lots of weird and wonderful, actually not weird and wonderful, just very convenient things. So it's great, like imagine, identity verification, for example, right? If you have a credential that everyone agrees in the trust framework is like the highest level of assurance that this is a solid passport would be the best example. If it's as high trust as like a paper passport, imagine applying for like financial products, leasing vehicles, applying for jobs, like anything that requires that very high trust electronic or just any documentation, be it electronic or paper, having that ability to share it quickly, easily, and having it consumable and validated very fast on the other side is also incredibly useful.
Yeah, I think the scenarios are endless, and that's what I'm keen to kind of dig in with you later on in the episode. I guess we've kind of done a bit of a 101 on what verifiable credentials are, a kind of rough idea of why we should care about them kind of becoming more prevalent. We spoke a bit about your experience at Condatis, and you've had a fair amount of time working on decentralized identity solutions that are obviously leveraging the idea of a digital credential. Do you have any examples or experiences that you could kind of walk us through? You know, I'm sure there's a few. Is there one in particular stands out, or multiple?
Yeah, I mean, it was before my time, but the one that Condatis worked on was the Sellafield. So this was a nuclear staff passport. So you could imagine a nuclear site. You have to have like the highest level of assurance that you are who you say you are. But also, you want to make sure that your staff and contractors have the right qualifications to be working in certain areas or on certain projects. So, yeah, we've talked about the idea of a identity, but then you could also then tie other credentials to that identity. And in this case, it would be like training and experience. So, it could be, if we're taking the Sellafield example, it might be that you need to have a certain engineering level to work on a certain product or a certain area. And for you to get access to the area where that product resides, you would need to share your credential. And then that would say, okay, yep, it's definitely Will Fletcher, and he has the correct qualification to be working on like said area or said item. And if we were to step back from the nuclear industry, obviously that is around nuclear fields or nuclear sites, so different like buildings or labs or whatever. You could also then apply that to kind of like different industries like energy or medical, or sorry, health as well, with like doctors. I think energy is a really interesting sector. If you are, say, working on oil rigs, it's I know from experience, a long time ago, I worked in the oil and gas industry. And to go offshore, you have to have credentials. You have to have like certain trainings. Boziet, and MIST are two of the ones I remember. And those are mandatory training you have to do to go on an oil rig. And if you at the moment, I believe they are still kind of like stored as kind of traditional paper documents. If you were to credentialize those, you could share them easily at the heliport before you go offshore, and it would be like, here you go, I have the correct credentials to be getting on this flight. Benefits there are obviously quite big because it costs a lot of money when someone cannot get on said flight to oil rig. So there's probably one thing I want to focus on or sing the virtues of is with verified credentials is you have all of the convenience of being able to share things quickly, but you do not sacrifice the security. So that's kind of a running theme when it comes to verified credentials. So in the energy sector case, like the oil rig, the operator knows that the contractor or the employee who's coming out to that rig has got the correct qualifications, so that they're covered from insurance point of view and from a health and safety point of view, and they also then get the convenience of it being like available to be shared because the employee or contractor has it on their phone and it's readily accessible, or in their wallet. So yeah, it's you can jump across to any sector. Like it could even be tourism. And
well, yeah, I was just going to say that's what was interesting with Gillian. We had the conversation about experience and being seamless traveler experience, and the output was much more about, building brand, building loyalty, making the user at hand have a really positive experience in in a typically high stress environment. But this is an example with the Sellafield example you shared is much more about efficiency, safety, security. Yeah. I mean, safety being a real big one. You're ensuring that nobody's going anywhere they shouldn't be, with false credential, a
Hmm.
false
Hmm.
claim or a fraudulent credential that they can do something they can, and then that's obviously going to be beneficial from an operational side to the organization, but it also is probably going to protect them. If
Hmm.
you think from a risk-based
Yeah.
analysis, it's the use of verifiable credentials. The idea of it's the same, but the output and the benefits are so vastly different between just those two examples of industry, and that's why I think it's interesting. Why I'm keen we chat about all the different scenarios, because they can vary so much.
Yeah, definitely, and I think it's why worth mentioning as well. Like this, why do we say decentralized? Like, what does that actually mean in this
Yeah.
case? And that is primarily because the information is stored with the individual rather than, in a central server somewhere. Um, why that's so good is because you can have something called data portability. So at the moment, when you interact with a system, have like it's between me and the system, right? If I'm signing up for my email address, I sign in with my username and password, and I then access it. It's a direct relationship. Um, if I was to have an identity credential, and if the systems were built in such a way that they could interact with my identity credential, I could then use that through something called federated access. We would say, okay, look, we know there's a high trust credential. It says Will is who he says he is. I have a Gmail, I was about to say Hotmail. I don't know if that's still a thing.
It
I
is.
think, is it still going?
I've got a Hotmail.
Perfect. Um, yeah, and my work account, say. So, I would not have to sign up to any of those things. I would just share, through sharing my credential, be like, yep, okay, this is, we've agreed that this is Will Fletcher and he can now use all of these services. And that's quite a simple example. If you then like step back and imagine a world where every system could parse verified credentials or could interact with verified credentials, you no longer have to sign in or up for things. You just have all of your any interaction you have with the digital system is through your credential, and it doesn't have to be a digital system. It could even be at door access. So I don't know. A hotel example is and this is very blue sky thinking at the moment, but say if I've checked into a hotel and they let me use my credential to check in, they could also then tie my credential to door access. So say you could share your credential to then access your hotel room. So again, that's like very perfect world, but that's the kind of the way you have to think in terms of like where this can go. And as it becomes more popular and like more people see like the benefits, and the kind of benefits we've already spoken about, they only get more powerful because there's just more and more people on the network within the trust framework, and then you can really start having maximum convenience as well as having very secure system as well.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned blue sky thinking in these scenarios. I mean, there's even probably even maybe more accessible ways different industries could use verifiable credentials, which, as I mentioned in the intro, that might be being overlooked. They
Hmm.
might think, oh, it never would have occurred to me that a verifiable credential solution, whether or decentralized solution, whether Microsoft Entra Verified ID, that would never
Hmm.
have entered my mind to be utilized.
Yeah.
What you and I have chatted before at length about different scenarios, and you've mentioned ticketed events, when it comes to finance, everything like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so those are two great examples. So, finance, for example, I don't know if you've or anyone listening has had the joy of getting a mortgage, and trying to collate all of the information you need to give to the bank to receive that mortgage can be slightly onerous. If you had a credential which stored all of your financial information or all the information that you need to acquire financial products, you could share that straight away. And because the bank goes, yep, this is a verified credential, therefore the information is sound. You've given them consent you said, yep, I'm happy to share it with them. They then get all the information they need straight away. And that information would be stuff like your address, your credit, say credit number, your credit
Credit
rating.
score. Yeah.
Yeah, credit score. Thank you, thank
Yeah.
you. So your credit rating, it could be like proof of address as well on top of your actual address. So like all of those things, your salary, your employment, confirmation of employment,
Yeah,
all
I
that good
guess
stuff.
paychecks, all that stuff. Also,
All that
now they want to know all these independent banks like Monzo, all these
exactly,
new ones
exactly.
that you need to kind of disclose all that information.
Yeah. So imagine, yeah, a world where you've shared that instantly, and that means you've not had to waste any time. I don't know. I think when I applied for my mortgage, it was probably 2 or 3 days of getting everything together just to make sure it was all good. And to create the credential at first, you still have to at some point do that work and put everything together. But once you have that credential, I think there's a concept of create once and use many times, which I think is a great part of verified credentials. So like, yeah, it's I now have this we'll call it a financial credential for applying for financial products. I've used it to apply for my mortgage. I've then applied for a credit card. I've then set up a bank account. And this is again like you need the institutions to kind of step up and go, okay, we're actually going to start using these systems,
Mm-hmm.
or like being exposed to decentralized. So like having a mechanism to facilitate the parsing of credentials, and that's where, like I said, it becomes more powerful, because the more institutions that go, yep, we're going to start using this, the more beneficial it becomes, and it's good even from the business side of things, right? So if we run with that financial credential idea, if you have your customers being able to quickly sign up to things, you're going to get zero, or not zero, you'll have far less drop off when it comes to like, I don't know. I've had it before. I was applying for a loan with one bank and I just got fed up. And then
Mm-hmm.
I kind of forgot about it for 2 weeks and then saw a better deal somewhere else. So
Mm-hmm.
like, from the bank side of things, that's not great. If I'd been able to quickly complete that transaction, they would have had my custom. But because I'd kind of jumped off and then jumped back on, you can do it there. If we then go across to where you mentioned ticketing, like the idea of having a ticket for an event as a verified credential is really powerful. It's issued to your wallet. It makes it very hard for like scammers to get involved, and for any spoofing to be done of that ticket. But you can take it further as well. You can do things like, if you could delegate your credential, so say if you want to delegate or sell your ticket, you could do it in a way that's everyone knows it's above board. Like, okay, I am delegating my credential to this person who is also a verified person, because they've also got a verified ID.
Mm-hmm.
It protects both buyer and seller. And if you want to take that further, I'm just giving out ideas for free here. You could also, if you're saying selling that on the secondhand market, you could have once the credential's issued, you could tie that to a payment. So say if someone's buying the ticket off of you, release credential, bang, then also the payment is completed at the same time. So like buyer and seller are happy. You could apply that to things like eBay and those kind of businesses where you're like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you need to, for a digital product or something you're buying off someone, you need to make sure there's like you're protected. You could do it there, and it could also be physical products as well. Although there would need to be some kind of like recognition of receipt, and once payment's released. So there's lots you can do. It's I think one of our kind of hurdles that we have is kind of like, when you talk about verified credentials, is like the scope is huge,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really about investigating individual industries and sectors, and kind of finding out like, okay, we all have identity issues, right? And the current model of many accounts per individual is not ideal. So yeah, sorry, I've done a lot of speaking then, but I hope that was
Well, it's
hopeful.
clearly, I mean, it's a topic that is almost potentially limitless,
Hmm.
because they can be applicable in every environment. And we're already starting to see signals of digital tickets,
Yeah,
digital boarding passes and things,
yeah,
but it's going almost a higher level up about that exchange between different parties. And that's something that came up in previous discussions, this idea, and you mentioned it with the financial institution example, is getting these institutions to collaborate and work together.
hmm,
As one example, you could just have it within one organization of institutions working
yep,
together, like the Sellafield example. I think that aspect could sometimes be seen as a setback. And we know in the identity and access management field that decentralized is a bit newer, and it is a bit more nuanced to what we're traditionally been using today, all of which is still very valuable stuff. Have you seen anything? Obviously, we know kind of Condatis is actively working on it. Any other organizations that's starting to think about dealing with these, the keyword, the buzzword, interoperability?
Yeah, definitely. Like, there's lots of startups in Europe that are looking at this. Some from education angle. There's a company we've worked with called Volt ID, who I think they're a good bunch, very knowledgeable, and they're kind of like pushing the envelope forward along with Condatis. There are some other institutions that I can't speak about yet, but if I was to, yeah, there's some, let's just say, large consultancies that are also looking at this now as well, very seriously. And what you mentioned there around internal use of decentralized, really powerful at large organizations, because I don't know about you, but even at Condatis, we interact with lots of different systems to do our job, lots of different services. So onboarding to said services can be slightly annoying. If you can design a decentralized system where you federate with your, we'll call it Condatis ID, to all those systems very quickly, you can get access to everything you need to get access to. You could have a part of your credential which says your job title, which would then inform which systems which services you need to use. You can then very quickly, when someone joins the organization, here is like everything Will needs to do his job in terms of the tools, or electronic tools. But it also goes further, because you could do things like we talked about physical access earlier, but if you were to have like to get into the building, you have to use your credential. Cool, excellent. But what happens if lots of organizations that maybe work together regularly, either through partnerships or through contracting to one another, if they were all using the same trust framework, you then, rather than having to be onboarded all the time to these different organizations and to get physical access to the buildings, to be issued with a ID card, all that kind of stuff, it's already done. It's all there. You rock up, someone has said, Will is going to be working here from the 29th till the 15th of next month. So there you go. You've set a time and date on this credential. It's been issued to you in your wallet. It's been validated against your ID credential. Perfect. Good. All done. So I think with decentralized, you can, the further you step back, the benefits multiply and multiply. It's very useful in a intercompany level or inter-organization level. It's even more useful sector level, and then even more useful go to the very top government, or if the higher it goes, the more benefits you reap. So it is and genuinely quite exciting, right? It's I don't often get excited about technology, but it feels like it's got momentum, and it also just feels like very useful, which I like. And what tends to do well is convenience, sorry. And this is convenience. It's kind of like you are removing administration from your day-to-day life, which everyone really appreciates.
Yeah. I think, to quote Gillian, "This is coming," is what she said.
Yeah.
So, that's why I was keen for us to have a chat about all the various possibilities, and in the sense that they're not so prescriptive or explicit. They can be very much, tailored to whatever scenario people feel. And hopefully, the intent of this particular episode was to just inspire some people in the industry to start, scratching their head, going, oh, is there any possible opportunity for us to do that in the business I work for, or the organization I work for? And so hopefully we have. So we want to thank Will for chatting with us today on that. And if you have got any new and interesting ideas about just even understanding feasibility, please do reach out to Will directly via LinkedIn, or send an email to our team to info@condatis.com. That's a wrap on episode 3, and continue to stay tuned for more exciting discussions as we verify this.